Welcome to AI and Automation in Action, where we show business leaders how to turn AI from a buzzword into measurable operational leverage. If you're serious about operational efficiency and responsible AI adoption, you're in the right place.
Well, hey, Hunter, welcome back to our next edition of AI and Automation in Action, where we dive in and go through real world use cases of automation. A lot of times it's not major or large or just massive automations themselves, but the efficiency gains that they bring can be stacked and multiplied. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today in the automation that we've built for a client that is looking for the ability to be notified when they see job postings relative to the services that they provide. So high level overview, you've got a client that basically does staff augmentation. And so one of the key drivers for them is if an organization is posting an open job position, they want to be made aware of it because a lot of times what they provide in terms of services can match up with the job posting that's listed. And the way that they were handling this previously was that their sales reps were basically going out to all of the job boards and monitoring for open positions relative to the services that they provide. And as you can imagine, that's kind of a manual process that takes time, takes effort, probably even more importantly, requires ongoing scheduling and reminders to go do that. So why don't you walk us through that overall scenario, what you were able to put together, and what that solution looked like, and then we can talk through any of the questions on the components.
Absolutely. So first things first was, of course, we visited with the customer to identify their exact process. We were able to have them record that, so we had a good understanding from very start to the very end of how they were currently conducting that. In terms of the solution that we developed for them, there is a dashboard that they log into. That is an authentication page that really is scoped to them to prevent unauthorized use. From there, it's integrated with a tool called Adzuna. And what Adzuna is doing is pulling job postings from all of the other related boards. So it's preventing them from having to go out to those platforms, and it's pulling those all within Adzuna. Adzuna is able to display all of those results based upon whatever filter they want to search by. They then are able to pull all of those details, and right now that's just ultimately preventing them from having to go to all of the job board postings. But to further that and to layer upon it, as long as the tools that they're using for their inbound sales or sales leads supports API access, we can continue to stack and layer upon that. And if it captures or finds a lead or someone that's within that realm, then it could automatically create them in HubSpot or send them a email through MailChimp or whatever kind of marketing tools that they're leveraging. And that's kind of what we were able to turn around and provide to them. It's a quick solution in terms of them being able to get to those leads instead of having to look through multiple boards and postings.
So in essence, what we've been able to do is provide something that, does it run all the time, or is it just a point in time, point and click, or?
Yep. Ultimately, they just get on this dashboard, they type in their keywords. So maybe it's an IT administrator they're wanting to look for. They type in IT administrator. They can then select even a state if they want and a radius, and it's going to pull in real time from Adzuna all of those job postings that are available right now.
Okay. So in terms of the overall workflow, that allows them a consistent process that saves time, but also allows the ability that, as you mentioned, if we wanted to incorporate this into a CRM to where now it's put into a calling list, or it sends out automatic email sequence, or touches another piece of their prospecting software, they've at least got that data coming in on a consistent basis without someone manually going to search for it and copy and transpose data from one application to the other.
Exactly. And another layer that they have expressed some interest on is the dashboard. So continuing to automate that process once it gets into HubSpot or MailChimp, being able to see from a dashboard perspective, how many users clicked on that email, how many users actually engaged in that, or maybe how many were sent over a weekly period. And that really just gives them that visibility into those metrics as well, and continuing to layer upon their existing automation.
That's awesome. And, I heard an interesting use case last week and talking with some other folks in the sales industry where they're using some unique prompts from Claude where they can actually go out and qualify a lot of the prospects. And they built this custom prompt to help them with that. But the challenge is always going out and finding the prospects to begin that data enrichment component. So this could be something that you could start with. Let's bring in a list based upon who's hiring and for what positions. And then you could tie in an LLM or another AI tool to help enrich that data before it actually gets to the sales team for them to do any actual work with.
Exactly. And to your point, also making sure that it's following your sales process that you have defined within your prompt, and making sure that it's a good fit in terms of a client or a customer for that outreach.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about the components that were used to bring this automation to reality. You mentioned that there's a page that they go to. Is that a page that we built, or how does that platform come into play? What did you leverage there?
Yep. So we built a dashboard leveraging internal tools that we have on Innovative Automations. And then in terms of integrations, it's integrated with Adzuna. That is a paid API subscription. So if that's something that a customer is interested in leveraging, they would need to pay for API access with Adzuna, or potentially a different platform if they're using one that supports API access. But that is all that it took in order to provide that solution for them.
So I know that was one of the things that they were amazed by, is the speed at which we were able to go from conversation and idea to reality, and this is actually working. How long did it take you from that conversation of, hey, here's what I have in mind, to here?
On the low end, I would say 2 hours from start to finish. And on the higher end, probably 3 hours. In terms of getting it right and fine-tuned with a login page and all of that, I would say you're probably looking closer to 5 to 6 hours, just to make sure that looks pretty neat and has all your logo and formatting on it and following your exact business process.
No, that's awesome. And the thing that I really like about this is just the starting point. From there, you mentioned that they're looking at adding additional functionality to that dashboard. You can build and stack and extend the capabilities, but you start with one automation that has an ROI and has an advantage. And now you just already have a leg up as you add more and more to it.
Yep, it's really like a snowball effect is the best way that I like to frame it. So you start with a small snowball, and once that automation's in place, it's rolling down a hill and it just continues to grow and grow and grow.
I want to touch on one more thing that you mentioned because I think it's important. You mentioned the paid API access. So a lot of times, one of the things we start with in terms of questions and qualifications revolves around the idea, is there an API access, and what does that API provide us? Those are the components that we look for to begin with. Next, we look at what does that API provide in terms of functionality, because just because an application has an API, that does not necessarily mean we get complete data or complete control of how it interacts with that data. So in terms of that, what does your process look like? Is there a way to go check that before a client were to start looking at an automation?
So first things first is going to be reaching out, or at least looking at vendor documentation, making sure that it supports API documentation. Then from there, actually jumping in and looking into the documentation and seeing what endpoints are accessible. At the very beginning, like I mentioned, we try to get that use case and that full business process. So that allows me to see, are they going to need to be able to list all leads or create leads on this platform? What all is that process on their end going to entail? Because then that frames in my mind the endpoints that this API access is going to need to interact with. And as long as those two match up, we should see on the API access documentation that it can list leads and create leads if that's something that was within that process. And as long as both of those are a match, then we can certainly provide it in terms of an automation.
That's a key point that I think is really critical for the beginning stages of an automation, because I've seen several times where we start in and yes, there's an API and we get excited about it. But the further we go into it, it gives us access to the contacts. But if it has deals associated with it, for example, it may not actually give us access to the deals fields inside the database. So it really depends on what the API enables and gives you in terms of access. The other component that I want to touch on lastly is on the paid access. So a lot of tools give you free access, especially if it's tools you're already using internally. It'll give you access to APIs that you may not have to pay for that access. Other tools may charge you, and costs can vary on that based upon how many times you're leveraging that API, how much data you're pulling across the API. So all of those are things that are involved in your discovery process that help map out that ROI.
And one thing that we have also seen that I want to call out is not only does it sometimes cost to enable an API, but some vendors will also price that from a endpoint perspective. So you'll be charged based upon how many endpoints with that API that you're needing to access. So when you get to PSAs or some of the bigger applications, maybe NetSuite, examples like that, those have a lot of data on the vendor side typically. And in order for it to query those results, that's where they are charging you and making you pay a little bit more.
Right. Well, that's a key component that, as you know, AI and automation are exciting technologies and really going to be transformational. We're going to look back on this probably in 10 years and say this was really a turning point in the overall business industry. But it comes down to an ROI. You got to make sure that what you're investing in terms of cost and time and effort has an ROI that pays you back in cost savings or functionality or other means that bring value. So great example. I enjoyed talking with you about it. Looking forward to connecting on the next one and hearing what all you're building.
Thanks again for having me, Shane. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to AI and Automation in Action. If today's conversation sparked ideas about how AI or automation could improve your operations, we'd love to continue that discussion with you. Join us next time as we showcase another real-world implementation and break down how to deploy AI responsibly and effectively. And if you want to brainstorm with our team, email us anytime at ideas@innovativeautomations.ai. Until next time.